Somewhere near you, there's a hosta bed that blooms from June all the way into September. White trumpets opening at dusk, a little fragrant, one scape after another. The person who planted it isn't doing anything magic. Meanwhile, you put in the work. You picked a good spot, kept it watered, maybe divided it to keep things tidy. And what you got was a beautiful green mound. Just green. Or you got a handful of buds that browned before they ever opened, and empty stems where flowers should have been all summer. That's the part nobody tells you when you buy a hosta at the garden center. Those tags are not giving you the whole picture. They tell you shade, they tell you easy, and they say nothing, not one word, about what it actually takes to get this plant to bloom. Hostas aren't broken. 5 small fixes turn on weeks of flowers. The failure wasn't you. It was bad advice, missing information, and a couple of habits that quietly work against the bloom. Every single season. I'm going to walk you through 5 specific things, each one a fix you can actually do, that change this plant from a leafy clump that fizzles into something that opens night after night. Let's get into it. Secret number 1. Light window. You did what the tag said. You tucked your hostas into the shadiest corner of the yard, maybe under a big tree, or against a north-facing fence, because everything you ever read called them shade plants. And they look gorgeous. Big, lush, layered leaves. But the flowers? Barely there, or not there at all. Here's what they left off the tag. Hostas are shade tolerant, but they are not shade dependent when it comes to blooming. Those two things are completely different. Leaves will thrive in deep shade. Flowers need light to exist. The mechanism is straightforward. A plant makes flowers with stored energy, and stored energy comes from photosynthesis. The darker the spot, the less photosynthesis, the fewer carbohydrates the plant has to spend on scapes. The leaves get first priority. Bloom is what's left over. In deep shade, there's nothing left over. What hostas actually want for consistent flowering is 2 to 4 hours of morning sun or a full day of bright moving dapple, the kind you get under a high canopy tree where the light shifts and flickers. Morning sun is the sweet spot. It's gentle enough that it won't scorch the leaves, but it's strong enough to fill up those energy reserves and push scape production. Afternoon sun is a different story. That's where you get the bleaching and burning. Morning is the word to hold on to. If your hostas are in a pot, this one is easy. Slide the container into a morning sunspot while the buds are forming, then move it back into deeper shade to protect the leaf color once the scapes are up. If they're in the ground and they're deep in shadow, think about whether there's a spot nearby that catches a few hours of early light. You don't need a big move. Even shifting a plant a few feet toward the sunrise side of a tree can change the whole bloom picture. You suspected it was too dark. You were right. Secret number 2. Bud protection. I want you to think back to last summer for a second. Did your hostas actually not bloom? Or did you just never see the flowers open? Because those are 2 completely different problems. And most people never stop to separate them. Here's what happens in a lot of yards. The scapes come up, the buds form, and then something eats them before you ever see a flower. The whole sequence, 2 to 3 weeks of sequential bloom, just gone. Overnight, sometimes, and you look at those nipped-off stems and you think, I don't know what went wrong. The plant tried. Something took it. Deer will browse hostascapes right down to the ground, buds, stems, the whole thing, in a single night. Rabbits are faster and lower to the ground, and they'll do the same. Slugs are slower, but they rasp through tender bud tissue in the dark, and by morning, you've got distorted or missing buds, and you have no idea why. The damage at the bud stage doesn't just cost you one flower. It costs you the entire scape's worth of bloom, because those flowers were going to open in sequence over the coming weeks. One bite, and that whole future is gone. The fix has two parts. For deer and rabbits, use a scent or taste repellent. Spray a perimeter around your hostas. And the important thing is the cadence, every 2 to 4 weeks, and immediately after heavy rain. Because rain washes the deterrent off, and that's exactly when they'll move in. Rotate the product occasionally so they don't get used to it. For slugs, scatter iron phosphate bait in a ring around the plants at dusk when slugs are active. It's safe around pets and wildlife, and it works. Net young scapes with lightweight garden mesh if browse pressure in your yard is heavy. Once the flowers are actually open, the worst of the risk has passed. But protect the buds, and you'll suddenly have a bloom show you've never seen before. Because it was always there, something was just eating it first. Secret number 3. Even moisture and mulch. So maybe you're protecting the buds now, and the scapes are coming up, but the flowers still seem to rush. They all open at once, faded in a week, and then it's over. Or the buds stall and crisp at the tips before they open at all. You blamed the heat. Maybe you blamed the variety. Here's what's actually happening. The plant ran out of water at the wrong moment. When hostas hit a dry stretch while they're setting buds, one of two things happens. Either the buds abort, that's bud blast, and it's exactly what it sounds like, or the plant pushes everything open at the same time in a kind of stress response, and the whole show burns itself out in days instead of weeks. The way a hosta blooms when it's happy is sequential. One flower on the scape, then the next, then the next. Opening over 2 to 3 weeks. That's what you want. That sequence only happens when the roots are cool and consistently moist. The target is about 1 inch of water per week during the growing and budding season. Rain counts toward that, so you're making up the difference when the sky doesn't cooperate. 1 deep, slow soak is better than 3 quick ones. But the thing that really steadies the whole system is mulch. 2 to 3 inches of organic mulch laid around the plant holds moisture in the soil, keeps the root zone cool, and slows down the swing between wet and dry that stresses buds. One detail that matters. Keep the mulch about 1 inch away from the crown. Right up against the base traps. Moisture against the growing point and invites rot. A ring, not a pile. Do those 2 things, steady water, mulched bed, and the bloom that was rushing through in a week. Start stretching into something you actually get to enjoy. Secret number 4. Stop pushing leaves. This one is going to feel like permission, and I want you to really take it in. If you've been dividing your hostas every few years to keep them tidy, or to share pieces with neighbors, or just because that's what you do with perennials, that habit is costing you flowers. And if you've been giving them a generous feed every few weeks to keep them looking lush, same story. Here's the mechanism. The number of scapes a hosta throws in a given season scales directly with 2 things. How many growing points, called eyes, are in the crown, and how much stored energy is sitting in the roots. Every time you divide a clump, you're splitting both of those things. Fewer eyes, less stored energy. The plant doesn't disappear, but it spends the next season or 2 rebuilding instead of blooming. You literally reset the bloom clock every time you put a shovel through it. The fertilizer piece is the same idea from a different direction. A high nitrogen feed pushes the plant hard toward leaves, big, glossy, impressive leaves, and away from flower initiation. The energy goes up into foliage instead of down into reserves and up into scapes. You get a stunning mound and nothing to show for it in July. The fix is almost embarrassingly simple. Leave the clump alone. Let it get big and crowded and full of eyes. A mature clump with dozens of growing points will throw a forest of scapes. Give it 1 light, balanced feed or a layer of compost worked in around the base in early spring. And then stop. Don't push it again. If you did this last spring and built good reserves, and kept the roots cool and moist the way we talked about, this coming summer is going to look completely different. More scapes, longer bloom, less work. That's the trade. Secret number 5. Choose and stagger bloomers. Here's a confession I hear all the time. I bought hostas for the leaves. The color, the texture, the size, and I just assumed they'd all bloom around the same time and it would be fine. And then July came and went. In a week, and that was that. The thing is, hostas don't all bloom the same week, not even close. There are early bloomers, mid-season bloomers, and then there's a whole group that doesn't open until late summer, August, sometimes September, and those are the ones with the secret. Hosta plantaginia and the cultivars that carry its genes, things like Royal Standard, Guacamole, Stained Glass, Aphrodite. These were shaped by evolution for evening pollination. The flowers are large, often white, and they open in late afternoon. And they're fragrant. Actually fragrant, in the way that stops you when you walk past. That lineage blooms when almost everything else in the shade garden is done, and a mature clump keeps sending scapes for several weeks. If your yard right now only has one type of hosta, you're getting one window of bloom, and then it's over. Add an early bloomer, a mid-season bloomer, and one of these late fragrant types, and you're running a relay. Something is opening from June into September. The other thing to think about is placement. Those late fragrant hostas release their strongest scent in the evening as temperatures drop. That's the moth pollination piece, the plant ramping up its signal when its pollinators are active. Plant them within nose range of a door, a path, a chair where you actually sit at dusk. Not at the back of a bed you only see from a window. Put the perfume where you'll walk through it, and your shade garden becomes a different place entirely come August. That's what bloom forever actually looks like in practice. So here's where you actually are now. Your hostas weren't the problem. The tag was, the missing instructions were, the habits you inherited from general gardening advice were, because those habits were built for plants that aren't this one. Give them morning light so they have the energy to bloom. Protect the buds before something steals the whole show. Keep the moisture even and the roots mulched so the bloom stretches instead of sprinting. Leave the clump alone and feed it once, lightly, so it can build up the reserves that turn into scapes. And add a late fragrant variety where you'll actually smell it at dusk. Picture that empty nipped stem from last summer. Swap it for a full scape opening, flower by flower, night after night, right by the door. Here's what I want you to do today. At dusk tonight, go outside, right now if you can. Spray a deer and rabbit repellent around your hostas and scatter iron phosphate slug bait in a ring at the base. That one act protects everything the plant is already trying to do. The bloom's been there all along. Now nothing can take it.